In New Rochelle, New York, Valerie Reyes, a gentle, art-loving 24-year-old, had a brief romance with Javier, a young immigrant. At first, they shared quiet dates and small dreams of the future, seemingly painting a peaceful picture. But when Valerie realized the love had faded and decided to end the relationship, Javier couldn't accept it. His attachment quickly turned into obsession, from desperate pleas and lies about his mother's illness to stalking Valerie as if she were a possession he refused to lose. Then one day, Valerie called her mother in a panic, crying out, "I feel like I'm going to die." Those chilling words of premonition became a harbinger of a horrific tragedy. What turned a fleeting romance into a brutal crime? And why did Valerie have such a vivid sense of her own impending death? Valerie Reyes, born on April 1st, 1994, was the only daughter in a family of 5, cherished by her parents and brothers. From a young age, Valerie was a gentle, compassionate, and determined girl. Instead of lively parties, she preferred reading books, painting, and spending time with family. After graduating high school in 2012, Valerie attended New Rochelle College, quickly becoming a beloved student due to her cheerful demeanor, kind heart, and readiness to help others. After college, Valerie worked at a bookstore in the East Chester Mall, where she indulged her passion for reading and sharing knowledge with customers. Besides books, Valerie loved singing, hiking, climbing, and especially painting portraits, a talent that allowed her to capture the depth of her subjects' souls. Her greatest dream was to become a professional tattoo artist, opening her own studio to turn art into living marks on her clients' bodies. At 24, Valerie chose to live independently in a basement apartment in New Rochelle. However, the anxiety and depression she had managed while living with her family resurfaced, leaving her prone to panic and loneliness. Meanwhile, in another corner of New York, Javier Enrique dos Reis, born January 3rd in 1995 in Venezuela, lived a life marked by instability. Holding dual Venezuelan and Portuguese citizenship, he had options but faced legal complexities. When Venezuela plunged into crisis in 2017, Javier sought refuge in the U.S. After his visa expired, he stayed illegally, joining millions of undocumented immigrants. In Flushing, Javier scraped by with odd jobs: janitor, bartender, cook, waiter. The unstable life drained him financially and emotionally. Though reserved, Javier was seen by friends as kind, hardworking, responsible, and polite. Yet beneath his gentle exterior lay the heavy burden of concealing his identity, which gradually eroded his mental state, creating internal conflicts even he struggled to understand. In January 2018, two seemingly unrelated paths, a gentle American girl devoted to family and art, and an undocumented immigrant living in unease, unexpectedly crossed on a dating website. That meeting sparked a romance full of hope yet fragility, leading to a tragic outcome no one could have foreseen. Their first dates unfolded in a relaxed atmosphere. Javier took Valerie to small restaurants in Flushing, where he was familiar from his service industry jobs. She appreciated how he listened to her talk about her dreams of becoming a tattoo artist and her love for her family. Javier shared stories of his homeland, Venezuela, his arduous journey to the land of freedom, and the challenges of living as an undocumented immigrant. However, within the first few weeks, Valerie sensed a stark difference in their emotional intensity. Javier's affection for her was fervent, almost obsessive. He called and texted constantly, wanting to know what she was doing, where she was, and who she was with. When Valerie didn't respond immediately, Javier became overly anxious, even slightly angry. In contrast, Valerie, with her independent nature and need for personal space, felt suffocated by his excessive attention. 3 months passed like a breeze, but for Valerie, they were filled with warning signs she couldn't ignore. Javier grew increasingly controlling and possessive. He wanted to know every detail of her life, from conversations with friends to her work schedule at the bookstore. When Valerie spent time with her family on Sundays, a sacred Reyes family tradition, Javier grew irritable and tried to persuade her to prioritize him instead. What unsettled Valerie most was Javier's reaction when she mentioned the future. Whenever she expressed doubts about their relationship, Javier became intensely emotional, even crying and begging. He would say things like, "You're everything to me," or "I can't live without you." Words that seemed romantic but carried a strong possessive undertone. By April 2018, Valerie made a firm decision. She couldn't see a long-term future with Javier. Their differences in personality, views on relationships, and his escalating controlling behavior left her feeling stifled. The breakup conversation took place in Valerie's basement apartment, where she tried to explain her decision gently and respectfully. For Javier, however, the breakup was not the end. Starting the next day, he launched a persistent and increasingly intrusive campaign to win her back. Phone calls began in the early morning and continued late into the night. When Valerie didn't answer, Javier left dozens of voicemails, ranging from pleas to subtle threats of self-harm. His messages became an unending stream. He sent long texts about love, regret, and promises to change. At first, Valerie responded politely, reiterating that her decision was final. But she soon realized that any response only fueled Javier's hope and persistence. Most concerning was Javier's use of manipulative tactics. One of his go-to weapons was a story about his mother's severe illness in Venezuela. He told Valerie she was undergoing painful cancer treatments, and losing Valerie made it impossible for him to focus on supporting his family financially. When Valerie tried to verify this through mutual friends, she found no evidence to confirm the story. The summer of 2018 became a nightmare for Valerie. She changed her commuting routes to avoid places where Javier might appear. Her pre-existing anxiety and panic attacks worsened under this relentless pressure. Finally, with no other choice, Valerie blocked Javier's number on all communication platforms, phone, messaging apps, and social media. In September 2018, after months of silence, Javier contacted Valerie again through a new account. This time, he didn't beg or profess love, but offered a seemingly legitimate reason. He claimed to have accidentally used Valerie's bank card for an online transaction and wanted to repay her. His message sounded sincere and remorseful, explaining that her card details were still saved on his phone and he had used them by mistake. But Valerie was exhausted by Javier's drama. She wanted no direct contact with him, even regarding this financial issue. Instead, she asked her close friend, Jeffrey Anderson, to act as an intermediary to resolve the repayment. Jeffrey, a loyal friend who understood the situation, agreed to help and communicated with Javier to settle the matter. After the financial issue was resolved through Jeffrey, Javier seemed to disappear completely. The final months of 2018 passed quietly, giving Valerie a sense of relief and hope that he had finally accepted reality and moved on. She began to recover from the psychological toll, slowly regaining confidence to open up to new relationships. But Javier's silence was only superficial. In reality, he had shifted to a far more dangerous form of attention, stalking Valerie in the shadows. On January 24, 2019, just a week before Valerie went missing, Javier sent a shocking message to his new girlfriend, claiming he had seen Valerie with another man. This message revealed a terrifying truth. Javier hadn't truly let go of Valerie as everyone thought. Instead, he had been secretly following her, observing her daily life without anyone's knowledge. His awareness of her new boyfriend could only mean he had spent significant time surveilling her. Even more alarming was Javier's tone in the message. He displayed clear anger at seeing Valerie happy with someone else. To him, Valerie wasn't an independent person with the right to her own life, but a possession he still believed belonged to him. This revealed that during those months of silence, Javier's mental state had not only failed to improve, but had grown increasingly warped and dangerous. On Sunday, January 27, 2019, Valerie spent time with her family as usual during their sacred family day. She was cheerful, smiling, and engaged in family activities as always. No one noticed anything unusual. Valerie talked about her job at the bookstore, shared plans for upcoming art projects, and enjoyed warm moments with her loved ones. But on the morning of Monday, January 28, 2019, everything changed. Valerie called her mother, Norma, in a state of severe panic. Her voice trembling with fear, she told her mother, "I feel like I'm going to die. I'm so scared, Mom." Norma, with a mother's sacred love, tried to calm her daughter and urged her to come home immediately. "Come home to me, and we'll figure everything out together," she said, her voice filled with worry. But Valerie seemed too panicked to think clearly. She abruptly ended the call, leaving Norma in a state of extreme anxiety. That evening, Valerie sent her mother a goodnight text, saying she felt better. "I love you, Mom. Sleep well. I'm calm now." Read the final message Norma received from her daughter. Valerie also shared her anxieties with her friend Jeffrey Anderson. and after their conversation, her mood seemed to improve significantly. No one could have known these would be the last messages Valerie ever sent. No one could have imagined that after that night, the beautiful young woman with dreams of becoming a tattoo artist would never return to her normal life. On the night of January 28, 2019, after Valerie's final messages indicating she felt better, a sinister plan was set in motion. In Flushing, New York, Javier Enrique dos Reis rented a Honda and drove toward New Rochelle, where Valerie lived alone in her basement apartment. The first notable detail was that Javier deliberately turned off his phone signal to avoid being tracked via location data. This was not a random act, but a calculated move, indicating he had planned what was to come. Upon arriving at Valerie's apartment, a heated argument erupted between them. Valerie may have demanded that Javier leave or expressed anger about his relentless stalking. Whatever the specific reason, Javier's rage exploded in a horrifying manner. Javier attacked Valerie with unimaginable brutality. Powerful punches broke her delicate nose, fractured her cheekbone, and left multiple bruises on her beautiful face. Valerie, with her petite frame, couldn't withstand Javier's strength and ferocity. Ultimately, under the relentless assault, she fell unconscious from pain and injury. But the brutality didn't stop there. While Valerie was unconscious, instead of stopping, Javier committed even more horrific acts. He wrapped multiple layers of tape around her mouth and chin, then tightly bound her hands and feet. These actions showed that Javier wasn't acting solely out of rage, but with cold calculation. The most horrific act was Javier locking Valerie inside a red-orange suitcase, the very suitcase they had bought together during their dating days. The cruel irony of using an item symbolizing their love for such a heinous act made the crime even more grotesque. Valerie was still alive when locked in the suitcase. However, with her mouth taped shut and her nose broken, she couldn't breathe properly. In the cramped, dark space, Valerie endured her final moments in excruciating pain and utter despair, slowly suffocating to death. After committing this barbaric act, Javier showed no panic or remorse. Instead, he methodically cleaned the scene. He collected Valerie's personal items, her phone, iPad, wallet, and some clothing. He also took a small pillow, possibly to create the impression that Valerie had left voluntarily. Particularly cruel, Javier used Valerie's fingerprint to unlock her phone after her death. He checked her messages and accessed her bank account information. This act revealed motives beyond murder, including financial gain. After cleaning up, Javier loaded the suitcase containing Valerie's body into the Honda. He drove to Greenwich, Connecticut, about 16 kilometers away, in a secluded wooded area. He discarded the red-orange suitcase with Valerie's body, hoping it would never be found. He then drove back to the city, beginning to cover up his crime and exploiting what he had taken from his victim. On January 29, 2019, an unusual silence hung over New Rochelle when Valerie Reyes, the punctual and responsible young woman, failed to show up for a meeting with her mother. Norma immediately felt uneasy when calls went to voicemail and texts went unanswered. Her worry intensified when Valerie didn't show up for work at the bookstore, something unprecedented. The next day, her family reported her missing to the New Rochelle police. At Valerie's basement apartment, police found no signs of forced entry, but discovered small bloodstains on a pillow and in the bathroom, along with her missing phone, iPad, wallet, identification, and some personal items. Recognizing the severity of the situation, police posted missing person alerts on social media, prompting numerous tips. However, all reported sightings of Valerie were confirmed to be false. A breakthrough came when police reviewed Valerie's bank account and discovered over $10,000 withdrawn from multiple ATMs after her disappearance. Surveillance footage captured a man dressed in black, his face covered, withdrawing money with her card. The vehicle he used was identified as a rented Honda from Flushing, with the renter being Javier Enrique dos Reis. Coinciding with the time of Valerie's disappearance, on February 5th, a week after Valerie was reported missing, workers in Greenwich, Connecticut, found a red-orange suitcase discarded in a wooded area. Upon opening it, they were horrified to discover the body of a young woman, bound tightly, her mouth taped shut, with multiple injuries to her face and head. The coroner confirmed it was Valerie Reyes, with the cause of death being suffocation following brutal assault. The case sparked further outrage when a worker photographed the scene and offered it to the media. Leading to widespread condemnation, Based on financial evidence, ATM footage, and the car rental history, police had sufficient grounds to target Javier. On February 11, 2019, he was arrested at his Queens apartment. Initially, Javier denied the crime, claiming he found Valerie's wallet, but faced with overwhelming evidence from the rented car to bank transactions and his past relationship with Valerie, his excuses quickly crumbled. On February 12, 2019, just one day after his arrest, Javier Enrique da Silva Rojas was formally charged with kidnapping resulting in death, a grave offense in the U.S. legal system. This charge carried a maximum penalty of death or life imprisonment without parole, reflecting the brutal and intentional nature of the crime. However, Valerie Reyes' case took an unusual turn in the U.S. justice system. Instead of a full public trial with a jury, attorneys, and lengthy debates, Javier chose to plead guilty. This meant there was no dramatic courtroom confrontation between the defense and prosecution. As often seen in murder cases, Javier's decision to plead guilty may have stemmed from various reasons. He and his legal team likely recognized the overwhelming evidence against him was undeniable. Alternatively, it could have been a strategy to avoid the death penalty and hope for a lighter sentence. Whatever the reason, this decision prevented a full public disclosure of the case details in a formal trial. Although there was no complete trial, case files, law enforcement reports, and media coverage provide insight into the initial defense arguments Javier and his attorneys attempted to construct. First, regarding Valerie's cause of death, Javier offered a completely false and manipulative explanation. He claimed to police that Valerie died accidentally during a consensual sexual act. Specifically, he stated that he and Valerie used tape as part of a consensual activity, and she died unexpectedly due to an accident during this process. This claim was a desperate attempt to reframe a deliberate crime as an unfortunate accident. Javier hoped that portraying Valerie's death as an unintended consequence of a sexual activity would help him avoid a first-degree murder charge and possibly face a lesser offense. Second, though not formally presented in court, media sources revealed that Javier's attorneys tried to portray him as a vastly different person from the brutal acts he committed. They described him as intelligent, generous, and soft-spoken, suggesting his horrific actions didn't reflect his true character. This strategy aimed to create doubt about whether Javier was truly a cold-blooded killer or merely an ordinary man who made a grave mistake in a moment of lost control. This is a common tactic in criminal cases, where the defense seeks to paint a positive image of the defendant to mitigate the crime's severity in the eyes of the jury or judge. However, the prosecution possessed a wealth of scientific and forensic evidence that completely debunked Javier's false claims and revealed the calculated brutality of the crime. The autopsy report from the Westchester County Medical Examiner's Office provided an indisputable conclusion. Valerie Reyes' cause of death was homicidal asphyxiation. This directly contradicted Javier's lie about an accident during a sexual act. The term homicidal asphyxiation means death by suffocation intentionally caused by another person, not an accident. Furthermore, the autopsy revealed clear signs of severe physical violence on Valerie's body. She had multiple injuries from being beaten, including severe head trauma, widespread bruising on her face, and a large hematoma on her forehead. These injuries indicated a deliberate and violent assault, completely inconsistent with Javier's claim of an accidental death. DNA evidence played a crucial role in linking Javier to the crime. His DNA was found on the suitcase containing Valerie's body, proving he directly handled it and was involved in disposing of the body. More significantly, Javier's DNA was found under the victim's fingernails, indicating a struggle where Valerie tried to defend herself in her final moments. Beyond forensic evidence, the prosecution had a range of digital and behavioral evidence showing the crime's intentional and calculated nature. Tracing financial transactions provided undeniable proof of Javier's actions after killing Valerie. ATM security cameras clearly captured Javier withdrawing money from her bank account after her death. In these videos, he appeared with his face covered, showing he was fully aware of the illegality of his actions and tried to conceal his identity. The car rental history further evidenced Javier's premeditation. Investigators traced the rented Honda CR-V, with the rental period aligning perfectly with the crime's timeline. Crucially, this vehicle was captured on security cameras near Valerie's apartment on the night of the crime, and later near the wooded area in Greenwich, Connecticut, where the body was found. Perhaps the most telling evidence of premeditation was data from Javier's phone. Technical experts discovered he had deliberately switched his phone to airplane mode when approaching Valerie's apartment. This was not a random or careless act, but a calculated decision to avoid being tracked via GPS or mobile data. Faced with this mountain of irrefutable evidence, Javier and his legal team opted to negotiate a plea deal. The negotiation process was lengthy, involving both the prosecution and defense, with the consent of the victim's family. Finally, on September 23, 2021, over 2 years after the crime, Javier Enrique da Silva Rojas was sentenced to 30 years in prison. In addition to his sentence, he faces deportation to Venezuela after completing his term. During the sentencing hearing, Javier had the opportunity to speak and expressed remorse for his actions. He offered apologies and displayed anguish over what had happened. However, these words could not ease the pain of Valerie's family. Norma, Valerie's mother, delivered a deeply emotional statement in court. She spoke of the unbearable grief of losing her beloved daughter and the dreams and future plans Valerie would never fulfill. Her words silenced the courtroom, and even Javier couldn't hold back his emotions, crying in the dock as he listened to the heartbroken mother. However, Norma also expressed skepticism about the sincerity of Javier's remorse. She believed it might be another form of manipulation, a final attempt to sway emotions and gain leniency. Even during sentencing, Javier's defense attorneys tried to mitigate his responsibility by presenting mitigating factors. They portrayed him as a first-time offender with no prior criminal record, suggesting the crime was committed in a moment of lost control driven by jealousy. They also highlighted Javier's difficult circumstances as a refugee facing psychological pressures from living illegally in the U.S. They argued that Javier suffered from depression and mental health issues, which contributed to his committing this grave crime. However, the evidence collected throughout the investigation painted a starkly different picture. Javier's actions, from preparation, renting the car, disabling his phone, to committing the crime, to cleaning the scene and covering his tracks, demonstrated meticulous calculation, not a momentary lapse or temporary loss of control. Valerie Reyes was a young woman who brought joy and happiness to those around her. Her tragic death sparked outrage in the community. Javier's actions, from planning the attack, beating her, locking her in a suitcase while she was still alive, to stealing from her after her death, revealed his cruelty and lack of remorse. He used Valerie's phone to withdraw money, discarded it, and traded her iPad for a new device, demonstrating his callousness. This story serves as a warning about the consequences of jealousy, manipulation, and violence, leaving an indelible pain for Valerie's family and friends.